In this corner from Warner Brothers and DC, we have The Flash. And in the other corner from Disney Pixar, we have Elemental. That's right. It's the fight of failures. It's the battle of the bombs. It's Flop Off. Renegade Online. Well, folks, welcome back. Another great day here at Valiant Renegade. It's good to see everybody out there once again. And if you are like one of the many folks watching this video, not yet subscribed to this channel, please take a moment and turn that little red subscribe button to gray. Hit that like button, hit that notification bell, share this sucker out on the social medias, and of course, please do leave a comment before you head out the door today. Before we get to the box office updates for these two bombs that have released this weekend, and yes, they will both be bombs. That is pretty much written in the stars at this point, and we're going to talk about why that is. But I want to go to our man on the street, our reporter in the field, Jay, Drunk 3PO. Jay, did you get to see The Flash, and what did you think?
My first thought is this movie's terrible.
Fantastic. Is there any potential audience out there for this film that could help Warner Brothers and this Ezra Miller movie?
If you really like terrible CGI and annoying lead actors, this is the movie for you.
Outstanding. Let's take a look first at the Friday numbers as they came in and were reported by Anthony D'Alessandro at Deadline Magazine. He suggested at that point last night that The Flash was dashing to a $72 million four-day opening. And the 4 days, of course, includes the federal holiday on Monday, Juneteenth. Of particular attention, again, less than 24 hours ago, industry estimates show that Andy Muschietti's The Flash from Warner Brothers DC is heading for a Friday of around $26 million. That would include the $9.7 million in previews of all the screenings up through and including Thursday night. That was estimated to yield around $26 million on the Friday, and then that would yield about a $64 million 3-day, Friday through Sunday, and a 4-day north of $72 million plus. And of course, coming in right behind it is the new Disney Pixar Elemental, $11 million on Friday, which would include Thursday previews, a 3-day through Sunday of $33 million, and 4 days of $36 million. Yikes. Yikes is actually a quote from this article. Let's hope it gets better. Here's a hint. It won't. And one other film of note, of course, that we've been talking quite a bit about is The Little Mermaid. $15 million is all they're expecting over the 4-day holiday weekend. As we've been telling folks, this movie has been winding down rapidly. At this point, $500 million is going to be a struggle to get to in its total global box office run. We expect, of course, the last 7 days' numbers to be updated on Sunday for the international markets. That will give it a nice little bounce. We'll see what happens there with some of the newer markets that came in like Japan, but as it stood in the beginning, it didn't look like it was going to add terribly much to the total. And it really doesn't matter at this point because Little Mermaid is on pace to lose $100 to $200 million at the box office in terms of what Disney spent on making and promoting this film versus what they actually got back in rentals from theaters around the world. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse and Transformers Rise of the Beasts will have another decent set of weekends here. Of course, Transformers winding down a lot more quickly than is Spider-Verse, which is because it's frankly much more of an international play for Transformers movies, and it always has been. We'll talk more about that on the Sunday live show, but let's get back to some of the news on The Flash and Elemental. This, to me, was the key part of this piece yesterday on The Flash. Early audience post-track exits from ComScore and Screen Engine for The Flash with a runtime of 2.5 hours shows 4 stars for general audiences, a 60% recommend, and a 3.5 out of 5 for kids under 12, a 57% recommend. And remember, Thursday night has always been better, skewed exits due to the fans showing up. And that was exactly my concern. 60 and 59, 58, 57% recommend. Not definite recommend like we saw with Top Gun flying up in the 80s and 90s, but just plain old recommend is getting 60% or less from the most ardent fans who are showing up, the ones who bought the tickets right when they came out a month ago. That suggested to me yesterday that this movie was going to be exceptionally front-loaded because the audience reaction was seemingly very, very bad to those who have seen it. That means this movie is probably not going to leg out very well, and we could be looking at a finish for The Flash of somewhere perhaps in the low 2X's by the time it's done for its domestic box office. And then this morning, just about 10 minutes ago before I punched record on this video, this article came out. This is what I was waiting for, to see what Anthony D'Alessandro had found overnight as more data came in, and it's bad for The Flash. Anthony says, The Flash loses speed with a $60 million three-day opening. Here's why. Now, that's down a good bit, about 5 to 10% from what they estimated initially for the three-day opening. From the article, the big looming question, which has been on everyone's mind in the wake of Ezra Miller's tabloid-laden 2020 through 2022 in regards to Warner Brothers DC's, is how would this affect the movie? The $200 million Flash, which it is not 200, that was the initial budget. I promise you it is strikingly higher now on the final spend because of massive reshoots that were involved in this film. The box office opening isn't looking good, with a three-day of around $60 million, off from the 70 to 75 that the studio was expecting. Warner Brothers Studio is still expecting the Juneteenth holiday to deliver and get the film to $70 million over 4 days, not the 72 plus. We're down from there. The Flash did $24.5 million Friday. That includes Thursday previews. Now, in the previous article, they were estimating $26 million plus, so we are now down from that. This movie is trailing off. Again, showing signs that it was heavily front-loaded, which is why in the weeks leading up to this film coming out, Box Office Pro continued to reduce projections for opening weekend of The Flash sharply. There was a lot of interest in the first few days for ticket pre-sales about a month ago, and then they just fell off, meaning there was a limited number of very engaged fans that wanted to go see this, and then not much else. Short of word of mouth being positive for this film, it was going to die on the vine, and it doesn't seem like there's a lot of positive word of mouth at all at this point. And D'Alessandro agrees, again from the article, but there's something else going on here with The Flash, billed by co-DC boss James Gunn back in January as, quote, probably one of the greatest superhero movies ever made. And that's that moviegoers disagree, giving it a B on CinemaScore and a 77% on ComScore. Screen Engine's post-track exits with a 59% recommend. Now, that is low. B sounds like it's a good grade, 77, not too shabby, but in terms of movie reviews and audience reactions to films like this, that is exceptionally low. Now, what's also concerning for the Warner Brothers bank accounts regarding this film is this tidbit of information that I think a lot of people will overlook. Warner Brothers was shelling out $31.3 million on spots for The Flash, which pulled in about 1 billion impressions. That's more in the iSpot metrics than what Disney spent on Guardians of the Galaxy, $24.3 million, and Elemental at $12.9 million, more than what Paramount expensed for Transformers Rise of the Beast at $17.2, and 3 times more than what Sony spent on Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse at $10.9 million. Now, what that's referring to is strictly domestic US and Canada television spots. That doesn't include all of the streaming advertising, AVOD, PVOD, SVOD. That doesn't include the advertising that they would run on places like Google or YouTube. That doesn't include advertising on search engines like Yahoo, for example, or any other major website out there. That's where a lot of the big money gets spent for advertising. The fact that Warner Brothers dropped over $30 million in spots for The Flash suggests that they have an enormous marketing spend for this film. It might be approaching somewhere possibly in the $200 million range. This was a movie they really had to make work for them, or they really wanted to have work for them. Granted, it was a holdover from the previous regime and Warner Brothers before David Zaslav and company came in following the spinoff from AT&T and the Reverse Morris Trust merger with Discovery. But be that as it may, they had to try to put their best foot forward, and I think they spent a lot of money trying to do it, and it looks like it will be to no avail. And of course, with everything I just said, that doesn't even include all of the international marketing that they would have to do for a film like this. This is why the price tag for the marketing on this sucker is going to be very high. And if we assume the all-in costs after major reshoots probably would have approached somewhere closer to $300 million instead of the original $2 million, and maybe as high as another $200 million in marketing spend, we're looking at a movie that might have about $500 million all-in cost here for Warner Brothers, which there's almost no chance that they're going to recover at this point, because this movie will land on HBO Max, or now Max, in the not-too-distant future. Warner Brothers doesn't have a lot of third-party distribution. Now, they may in the international markets, and certainly they'll get some PVOD sales and rentals, certainly. They will see some physical media sales, but it's probably not going to be near enough to get them over the hump on this film. Warner Brothers is going to be eating a big loss on this one. The good news, however, for The Flash is that Disney's Elemental from Pixar Studios will be even a bigger bag of suck this weekend. Elemental looking to open with around $30 million on a $200 million production budget. And this is something we're going to talk about Sunday due to some recent articles that have come out talking about Pixar's woes and Disney not being able to get budgets under control, and they desperately need to, especially when all their competitors out there, namely folks like Universal, DreamWorks, and Illumination, can pump out movies like Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, Minions: Rise of Gru, and now the Super Mario Brothers movie, all of which did far better than any of the recent Disney animated entries for less than half the cost in many cases. Elemental from Walt Disney Studios and Pixar is now slated to be the third in a row massive animated flop for the Walt Disney Company. In fact, the only thing that the Walt Disney Company can really hang their hat on that they both made and distributed at this point might be Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, looking like it's actually going to settle into very close to breaking even. Because as I remind folks, there's nearly $100 million of Chinese box office baked into that $800 million total, which is the lowest yield back to studios. But Disney's going to get close on that one, and they can celebrate it as at least a moral victory inside their C-suite. But not so for Ant-Man, not so for the massive losses they're going to suffer on The Little Mermaid, not so for the massive losses from Lightyear and Strange World, not so for the massive losses at this point that Elemental is almost certain to hand them. Stay tuned. We'll be covering more on this on the Sunday live show right here on Valiant Renegade at 6 p.m. Eastern. We may push it back a slight bit this weekend due to Father's Day, of course. If we do, we'll let you know. It'll be at 7 o'clock Eastern instead. Please leave your thoughts in the comments below. Are you going to see The Flash? Have you seen it? What do you think? What about Elemental? What about any of these films still out there? Want to hear from you. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and until next time, take care.